Hi, this is Destiny Fawbush. I am doing the movie presentation assignment, and the movie I chose was As Good as It Gets. Um, Question number one is, what psychological disorder was illustrated in the film, and did the person meet the criteria for abnormal in this portrayal? The psychological disorder that was illustrated was obsessive compulsive disorder, or also known as OCD. And I do believe the person in the film met the criteria for abnormal. Melvin was the main character, and he did several things that I'll talk about throughout the questions that was not normal for a normal everyday occurrence for humans. Question number two was, what symptoms of mental illness did I see in the movie? And after considering typical symptoms and behaviors for this disorder, I was to determine the extent to which I believe this was a realistic portrayal of the disorder. So the type of symptoms of mental illness I noticed were anxiety. When others tried to touch him, and he would get very, very anxious when his routine was messed with. I thought it was a very realistic portrayal of OCD. Melvin's apartment was very well organized, from his M&Ms being separated by the color. His records and books were all very neatly organized. He has to make sure he locks and relocks the door 5 times. He has to turn the lights on and off 5 times. He has a deep fear of contamination. He cannot use the same bar of soap. He uses extremely hot water when he is washing his hands, and then he'll throw the bar of soap away and grab a new one. He has to wear gloves in public, and he cannot step on any cracks in the sidewalks. His bottles of water are very well organized. He doesn't show a lot of emotion, I noticed, of his or feeling. He often seemed very judgmental of people by referring to the neighbor's bodyguard as black, and the people that were sitting in his, at his table at the local diner he goes to every day, he called them Jews. He tells Carol, his waitress, she has black spots under her eyes because she has a lack of sleep due to her son being very sick. At the diner, he brings his own silverware in fear of the ones the diner uses not being clean. He referred to the ones that clean them as, I've seen the help that you have, whatever he means by that. But I take that as he wasn't very trusting that the silverware at the diner were going to be clean. Melvin does not do good with change. He has to have a routine for everything, and he gets very upset if it doesn't go as planned. His anxiety level and will skyrocket, and he gets very, very anxious. And I've noticed he gets very angry if people question, or again, if something doesn't go as his routine is supposed to go. Melvin eventually seeks help and starts to get somewhat better. He gains some emotion, and he lets the neighbor Simon's dog stay with him, and he had a hard time giving the dog back to Simon, his neighbor, after Simon got better from being mugged. At the beginning of the movie, Melvin actually threw the dog down the garbage chute, so that was something, he came a long way to actually letting the dog stay with him while Simon was recovering. He doesn't seem to see eye to eye with Simon at the beginning of the movie, but he actually let Simon move in with him because Simon was having a hard time. He was actually broke after he got mugged. He had several hospital bills and whatnot that he could not afford to live anymore. He eventually actually helps Carol's son out. He pays the medical bills, and he got a doctor to come over to their apartment so that he could get, one-on-one care with Carol's son, so that Carol could actually get back to the diner and help Melvin get back on a routine. Eventually, Carol and Melvin start to date, and they go out to this restaurant, and Melvin doubts himself when part of OCD is, doubting. He, wants to, reassure himself. So when Carol and Melvin go out for dinner, he asks several people the same question. He's asked the restaurant servers if they have hard-shelled crabs. Everyone did reply yes, but because of his doubts, he had to ask multiple people. Question number 3 is, were any casual factors for the character's disorder suggested in the in the film? If so, which ones? In the movie, once Melvin starts to show more emotion, his symptoms start to disappear, especially with being more involved with Carol. At the end of the movie, Melvin is too busy thinking about Carol that he forgets to lock his door, which is very uncommon for Melvin from the start of the movie, locking, relocking it 5 different times. He allows Carol to kiss him when in the beginning of the movie, he didn't want anybody touching him. He would get very anxious if somebody even rubbed him on the shoulder, or, he didn't want to touch the dog without having gloves on, or at one point he picked the dogs up with oven mitts. He would walk sideways just so people didn't touch him in a very, very busy street. So it seems that his fear of contamination is starting to disappear. Melvin also starts to pat Simon on the shoulder later in the movie, which is something he would have never done. Melvin also starts to walk out cracks at the end of the movie, just to make sure he didn't look funny in front of Carol. He didn't want to ruin that because he really liked her. Melvin notices that nothing bad happens when he would walk on cracks, so his obsession was starting to go away with that as well. Question number 4, and that stated, what types of treatment, if any, did the person in the film receive? From what I have read and researched, the main way to treat OCD is through intense exposure to the obsession without letting the person perform the compulsions associated with the obsessions. So in the movie, Melvin states that his doctor prescribed him medication to deal with the OCD, and that might be, but that might not be, that's most likely not going to be the only help that people seek. From what I have read, OCD usually cannot be treated just by medication. Melvin's doctor told him that he should break a routine, but his doctor did not give him specific instructions, which was someone with OCD should have or needs, because they need to follow what they need to do in order to make the obsession or compulsion go away. I do not believe this is a typical form for individuals with OCD, because OCD is intense, and I believe that you really have to want to change your disorder. I personally feel that treatment to overcome OCD is more intense and more structured than just Melvin's doctor prescribing him a medication and just saying, you need to overcome this. Question number 5, what impact did the person's disorder have on others in his or her life? And do I think this impact was realistically portrayed? Why or why not? I feel that the person it impacted the most was Carol at the diner. She was the waitress, but she did not like that Melvin depended on her not to mess up his routine. I noticed in the movie that, he didn't want anybody to help him except Carol. And Carol classified Melvin as a creep, and I think she did that because she didn't really understand the length, I guess, or the depth of the OCD disorder that he had. It wasn't that Melvin was it wasn't that he was being a creep. He was needed her. He depended on her to make the routine go smoothly. And Melvin went to Carol's house and did everything in his power to make sure that her son was going to get better, so that Carol could return to the diner and Melvin could get back on his routine. I personally do think it was a realistically portrayed, except for the fact that Melvin went to find Carol and went to her personal house, and obviously went out of his way to do whatever he could to help her son get better. Question number 6, after viewing the movie, what do you think it would be like to live with this mental illness? I personally think it would be extremely hard to live with OCD. It seems that multiple people often got mad at Melvin because of his routine he had to have. It's not like he, was choosing to be a pain, but, it was because of his disorder that he had to follow this certain routine so that his anxiety and he wouldn't get so anxious. No one really understands the mental illness if we do not have it. I think it would be hard to explain to others what OCD is and why you have to have things a certain way. Question number 7. What was your overall reaction to the movie and how mental illness was portrayed? I actually thought it was a very good movie. My 3-year-old daughter watched it and had several questions. So that was a lot of fun to be able to explain to her what was happening and include her in on this project as well. I personally do not have OCD myself, so watching a movie that um, went into great detail about what OCD is and, the minor details of having, the water bottles lined up or the cassette tapes, in his apartment. It really put it into perspective on how tough it would be. And not only that, like how tough it would be to overcome it as well. You really have to live in a routine to not get anxious or have high anxiety and know how to handle those if you do. Um, Question number 8 was just applying additional research from our sources and our book as well. Many people with OCD know that their behavior is unreasonable, but are still unable to stop obsessing without help. OCD is classified as an anxiety disorder in which people have reoccurring obsessions, usually unwanted thoughts or ideas. People with OCD have to repeat certain routines or habits. OCD involves persistent, unwanted, fearful thoughts and or irresistible urges to perform an act or repeat rituals to help relieve the anxiety created by the obsession. About 1% of people in the U.S. adult population experience OCD, and almost 51% of those people that experience it experience a severe case of OCD. Scientists still do not know the exact cause of OCD, but genetics do appear to play a role in it. People with OCD either have an obsession, a compulsion, or experience both. In adults, women are more affected at a slightly higher rate than men, whereas men are more commonly affected in childhood. Common examples of obsessions are fear of germs, fear of being hurt and or hurting of others, troubling religious or sexual thoughts. Examples of compulsions are repeatedly checking, counting, cleaning, washing all or specific body parts, or putting things in a certain order. Everyone worries or sometimes double checks. People with OCD have these thoughts and do these rituals at least an hour or more each day. I could not imagine doing the same thing for an hour each day. Sometimes people that have OCD, with their fear of germs, they'll wash their hands so much throughout the day or for extended periods of time at once that their hands actually become raw and start to bleed. When people with OCD try to stop their obsessions, compulsions, they experience high levels of anxiety, which was what kind of happened to Melvin in the movie. Anytime somebody tried to change him, he would grow very angry and anxious. There are numerous biological and psychological factors that contribute to OCD. So this is a fun project. I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of the year.